a lot of people feel like being a small business, you're not important enough to matter. The goal of this is to stand out in your industry and to be recognized as an expert and a leader.
Welcome to Solo to CEO. We're sitting here with Mickie Kennedy. And let's jump right in. Mickie, tell me what you do.
I run eReleases, which is a online press release distribution platform, and I send out releases on behalf of clients in the hopes of getting earned media or articles written about them in both traditional media as well as the evolution into social media and other different types of places where news sort of propagates and spreads.
Awesome. And we're going to dive into all that. First of all, I just want to introduce, this is the kind of like the new look for our podcast. We're going to be doing things, for the most part at least, we're going to be doing things virtually. And we might even be introducing live podcasts where people can come in and listen and actually ask questions at the end. We're not there yet. Maybe even the next episode we'll do that. But this is where we are right now. And this is number one, and we're doing number one with Mickie. So this is actually, I think this might be episode number 20, unless we release it out of order. But here we are. So where do you feel this eReleases, or the service that eReleases does, which is press releases for small businesses, where do you feel like that falls in terms of priorities for marketing?
I think based on our customers, I would say it falls pretty low. A lot of people don't think about press releases, or they feel like this is something that may have worked in the past, but may not work going forward. They may feel like they need to use a PR firm or something like that to get media. And I am the person out there educating and telling people, that's not true. It can work for anybody. What I find is that you have to be a lot more creative about what it is that you're announcing. The traditional releases that you might see other people in your industry releasing probably aren't the best ones to be doing. A lot of new hire press releases generally don't result in much unless it's like a new executive or you've got an industry veteran joining the company. But there are a lot of great opportunities, and the fact that we go out over the wire gives you the ability to really leverage if you do have something meaningful to say. And again, a lot of people feel like being a small business, you're not important enough to matter. But journalists like to be seen as curators, and they don't get a lot of appreciation for talking about the latest iteration of Microsoft Office. But when they do talk about a new service or tool that someone in your industry may not know, they generally get accolades. And so for that reason, they certainly do put the spotlight on new companies, small companies, and so don't feel that you don't matter just because of your size or your importance, because it is a really great opportunity out there for lots of people.
Awesome. And why do you feel it is the main reason? What do you feel is the main reason why people don't really value this so much?
I think that from a marketing standpoint, it's hard to measure ROI. You don't get to put a tracking URL in a press release and then figure out your conversion rate. In many cases, you're not going to get a link. In the biggest successes that I have, like the Wall Street Journal and The Economist and Financial Times and New York Times and places like that, you don't get a link to you. So it's hard from a marketing standpoint to say, what did this article mean for us? That being said, I have customers who come to me and say, hey, we had a 70% jump in revenue last month when we got this article. And they're pretty certain that that article is what moved the needle in their business. But outside of that, from a marketing standpoint, it really is hard to measure the conversions. And so it is one of these fuzzy areas where it does make it difficult to determine what the ROI is. That being said, a lot of people come to me after they've had an article and they're like, hey, I had this article, and I can tell from our logs that we got like 300 visitors, and we sold 200 more than we normally sell. Could those 200 have come from that article? And I tell them, it's possible. Not everybody who saw that article and came through to you, are going to buy, but it is likely that if they were interested enough when they read it, that they went to your website, they saw that this is what they were looking for. Generally, when people encounter earned media, they get this emotional response that they don't get from an ad. And they generally do like to support, the companies they read about. I myself have looked at a lot of Kickstarter campaign articles and blog posts, and then just went to the Kickstarter campaign and supported them. And so it can convert that high, especially if your price point is pretty reasonable. And I challenge any really good marketer to come up with a copy or something that would convert at that rate. But as I pointed out to him, of the 300 people that went to your site from that article, from your logs, there's probably maybe 1,000 people who read the article that didn't bother going to your website. So you do have to keep that in mind as well. But I think one of the reasons that earned media is so good at bringing you great customers is generally they're not price shopping. They read that article, they have this emotional response to it, and they just want to support you, and they're not opening another window and saying, can I get this cheaper elsewhere? And as a result, they tend to be more loyal customers long term, and that's extremely valuable. And also, you can take that same link to that article and share it with your social media, share it with your leads, share it with your customers. It is surprising that your own leads and customers can have those same responses as well. There's always customer churn, and my customers who do put their earned media in front of their customers do have lower churn as a result of that. And the same thing with leads. They're like, yeah, there's always like a certain percentage of leads that never convert. And all of a sudden it seems like, we're converting more of our leads as we expose them to our earned media from the past and, current earned media. So it is something. I think that it's credibility. So if I'm looking at vendors and I'm considering someone, and I'm getting occasional trickle emails and information from this company, but I'm just not sold, that they're the place to go with. Maybe I'm already working with someone, or maybe I've, considering someone a bit more strongly, and all of a sudden I see an article about them. I'm just like, this person wrote about them, and it's almost like social proof that they plucked them rather than anyone else to write about.
But people see that it's communicated content.
It is. And I think that there's a rapport that's built, and an excitement when someone gets an article written about them. And, it doesn't quite serve as a referral, but it almost seems like a referral when someone writes about you, especially if it's a writer that you recognize or a publication that you value. It really does give you some clout and currency in the space that's out there.
Right. Cool. So you mentioned that one of the challenges, well, I would say it's one of your challenges, that people don't see the ROI directly from this. How do you combat that?
I think it's just education and exposing the opportunities that people get from it.
Like right now, podcasts.
Right, exactly. Just educating people of what other people are experiencing with it, what it meant for them. We helped a carpet company in New Jersey, with getting news out, and I told them I didn't think that they were very newsworthy, but that being said, I felt like there were avenues for perhaps getting some news for them. Particularly in their trade industry publications, where the audience of those are not their customers. And so despite that, they felt like that was a pretty good target. And at the end of a campaign with them, we had about 30 articles. The bulk of them in trade publications, although we did get their local newspaper and New Jersey Magazine, which is a publication that was important to them. And they put all of their clippings together in what they call a brag book. And every time they go and give a quote to someone, they would just open it and say, look, we've been picked up in Floor Trade Weekly, this publication, that. And just by adding that 1 minute little walk through this brag book, they started converting 17% more of those consultations. And I think it is that if I'm a homeowner and I'm looking for someone to install flooring, I'm just like, this place might be a couple $100 more, but they've been nationally recognized in all of these publications. They obviously know what they're doing. They're completely legitimate. It throws up all the right indicators and signals of trust, and as a result, almost one out of every five sales that they were previously losing, they're now converting.
Is it the same article that goes to all these publications, or each one is a different article on the same topic?
So it's this in the case of like the carpet company, we did a series of press releases, but the first release that did really well, we got like 11 or 12 of these trade publications writing about them, and so they all wrote articles on that same press release. So it's a very similar theme, but every article was written by each publication. So publications want to control the copyright, and the articles draft the article the way they want. Sometimes you can release Microsoft can release what they feel is good news, and someone write a negative article about it. So you don't always control that. But for most small businesses, you don't encounter that. But the articles generally are about the same thing, but they're completely written differently.
Okay, cool. So are you familiar with Brand Featured?
It rings a bell. Is it one of these places that puts you like in Forbes and other places like that, or no?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sure there are many websites that do this, and Fiverr. And so what separates eReleases or your service from these, automated, whatever it is, services?
That's right. So in our cases, we're sending stuff out with no guarantee of media pickup, but the hopes of getting media pickup, and we build campaigns of several releases trying to get that earned media. In these other cases, you might appear on Forbes, but you're not going to be in the print publication. The magazine itself. You're going to be relegated to basically the equivalent of a section on their website that's like a blog or something like that. So right. And also it's paid, and I think that a lot of people recognize that these paid placements are just that. I don't know if they're indicated on it. I noticed some of them have said that in the past, but others do not. I think it's because the writer is a columnist, and then they're the ones who collect the money. But I think that the average person recognizes that a lot of these are not, the way they're written and everything like that. They don't really come across as like a genuine earned media article. And I think that it's one of these things that may look good on a LinkedIn or a website, but I think that it doesn't really pass a lot of the smell test, I think, with the average person, or even a savvy person who sort of knows about those types of almost like sponsored or paid placements.
So how would a business owner like myself, for example, sniff out who's the real deal, right? Meaning, who is a press release company that's going to be, doing this properly, and who is a press release company that's just going to be doing, the automated, whatever it is, and not really getting you any results.
Right. So in our space, I'm less concerned about the brand featured and a lot of those companies that do the paid placement, because they're expensive. They're charging many thousands of dollars to get a single article or a couple of articles in places and stuff like that. So
brand feature is actually about $300
for
It could be something else that you're referring to.
Well, yeah. I mean, it really depends on the publication. They're tiered, and they often do have places that are much cheaper, that are generally smaller publications and things like that. But generally, the Forbes articles I've seen have been closer to 1,000 and up. Some of the Huffington Post have been, like that as well. Uh, I think that if you're looking, if someone is saying we can pay this amount and get you on this publication, then it probably is paid placement. Because I can't tell when I do a press release what places are going to pick you up. If you're looking for a guarantee of the New York Times, I can't give you that. But we could send it out, and maybe the Washington Post picks it up instead. So we really never get a guarantee of what places are going to pick it up. I think the important thing when you're choosing a distribution platform is, are they going over a wire? And in the U.S., there's really just two wires that matter. There's PR Newswire, which is the oldest and largest newswire of press releases, and that's who we work with. The other one is Business Wire, and they're both great wires. And most journalists
Wait, hold on a second. Educate me. Wire?
Wire, yes. So it comes from the old wire feeds that went directly into newsrooms. A lot of them were satellite broadcasts or direct feeds. And of course, with the internet, they're all virtual now. But basically, journalists have a login. They can look at industry feeds. They can customize a feed. So if I'm in, say, a particular industry, I can, customize my industry feed and have keywords to exclude so that the feed that I'm seeing is really tailored to what I cover as a journalist. And so Business Wire, PR Newswire are the main two places that journalists go to look at press releases to turn into articles. There are a lot of companies out there with wire in their name that are not true wires. They do not have relationships with journalists. I can think of one that's like, $100 to send out a release, and a lot of people believe that it's a wire because it has wire in its name, but it doesn't reach journalists. And if you look at the website, they talk a lot about syndication and your press release replicated on a bunch of websites. Syndication is something that's always happened with releases that go over the wire. Like with PR Newswire, you get a report that might show your release on 100 websites like Yahoo and things like that. But that's not media pickup. That's not earned media. That's not an article. No one wrote an article. That's your press release duplicated on a few websites. And it's just something they've always done, mostly for the benefit of publicly traded companies that have to meet certain disclosure. So that's why all these releases appear on like Yahoo Finance. But it's not important, and it's really a distraction. But there's a whole cottage industry that now does that. And so this one that's $100, you'll get a couple hundred links showing your press release on these places. But what you'll never get from that is a journalist writing about you, because journalists won't see it. There's no journalist in the equation. It's just a platform for replicating your press release on a bunch of websites called syndication. And so you really, if you're looking, if the end result is earned media, which I think it should be, it doesn't help you from that standpoint. And very few people see you, because even the releases that are on Yahoo Finance are sort of buried on Yahoo Finance, and you have to drill down to even get to see the release there. And when you do a search in Google News, usually only one of these syndicated sites show up, because they recognize all the other as duplicate content. So it really doesn't help you. It's all, it should be no follow links. And so I really feel that that's a distraction. So anybody that you're looking for, you want to make sure that they are working with a true wire, and disseminating your content. And in the case of eReleases, all of our releases go out nationally through PR Newswire, which would normally cost about $1,600 for a 600-word press release. But through us, it's about a third of that price. largely because I really I really twisted their arm to try to get the maximum distribution for the least amount of price. And at the time that they approached me, I was charging my clients $250, and they were really, they wanted to help us, and they liked that we were helping small businesses, which their salespeople would never reach out to because they're not doing enough volume to matter. But they were wanting me to do like a web only or a local state distribution on behalf of my clients. And I was just like, hey, these guys may be small, but they really deserve a national distribution. And so, we really fought to get that. So all of our releases go out nationally through PR Newswire without having to pay $1,600.
Awesome. So there are some terms that you use. I just want to confirm that I understand the meanings of them. So when you say earned media, you're referring to versus paid media, right? So paid media is where you pay someone their interest in posting your content is because you're paying them. Whereas earned media is that there's an actual inherent interest in the content that they actually want to post it without you paying for it.
Correct. So in the case of like, if you pick up a newspaper, if it's an article, it's earned media. If it's an ad or it's an article in a slightly different font that says sponsored or advertisement on it, that's paid. And a lot of publications don't generally do the article with paid or sponsored on it and things like that, just because they don't want to confuse their readers.
Right. So, but how do you make a business? Take my business, for example. Let's work with me for a second. How would you make me newsworthy? Or am I just not newsworthyable? I think I'm newsworthy, but do other people think I'm newsworthy?
So generally, I run through an audit with all the customers and try to determine, what is it that they're doing that potentially could be newsworthy or interesting. Sometimes it's the story behind the company. Tell us about the founder, tell us about how the company started, or how a particular service came into being. It's not a coincidence that everybody that shows up on Shark Tank opens with how they got started, and they share a story. It usually comes across as like this authentic moment. It could be an obstacle that they overcame, or a vulnerability like a health issue or losing a spouse or something like that. But it's something that really allows people to relate to you, and it humanizes you and gives a human interest element. And sometimes those could be a good story for sending out.
You're uncovering something very powerful over here. And I'm going to express it actually in a question. What do you feel is the most important component in a business, meaning important to other people?
I think it is, trust, and that, us relating emotionally to a business. I think that if you can bridge through the logos and the corporate stuff and actually have a real meaningful connection to a company. And journalists like stories. Whenever I get a product launch press release that's just, here's the product, here's a list of features, I sort of, if they're looking for feedback, and sometimes they're not, I will tell them, I said, put a use case study in there. I'm sure someone beta tested this or tried it out. What was their outcome? And, can you get a quote from them? And that gives more elements for journalists to write a story arc. Journalists like the story arc. We've been following it since we've been sitting around fires and telling stories, that there's a path and a journey, and anything that you can add to your press release to put more elements in there to build out a potential story is really going to help journalists, and they're going to recognize that as being more newsworthy than just a product launch that's a list of features.
And it adds a lot more meaning to it, right? Don't talk about what you do, but why you do it. Yeah,
absolutely. Other things that the media really loves is data. And for that reason, whenever I have a client that comes to me and they've just, maybe they've been with a PR firm and got no earned media, And that happens more times than you can imagine. I've talked to people who spent $20,000, $40,000 on PR campaigns, and they've really got no earned media. Even knowing that you could do paid placement, they got nothing. And so when they're feeling that dejected, I'm just like, well, let's do a survey or study within your industry. I've never had that fail. I'd like to ask 16 meaningful questions that are really appropriate right now. What are things that are going on in your industry? Maybe what are questions you have that if you were at a conference, you would ask your colleagues, have you noticed this? And just ask those 16 questions. I put them in SurveyMonkey, 4 questions per page. And on the last page, you can be a very little adventurous and ask maybe a wacky or left field question. Those can sometimes be really good. And that way, on the 4th page, if they abandon it, you still got 75% of their responses. And then you take that link and you just approach a small or independent trade association in your industry for them to disseminate it. You don't have to have a Rolodex of people in your industry to send it to. You can just reach out to one of these associations. I like ones that have at least 700-800 members or more. Stay away from the large trade associations. They tend to control their own media. They don't really like to partner. But generally, if you take that link and you ask a small or independent trade association if they'll send it to their members in exchange for you mentioning them in a release you'll be issuing over the wire, they see that as a win-win. They don't get a lot of media attention, so they're...
What's a trade association?
These are just associations that people belong to in different industries. In my industry, the big one is I think PRSA, Public Relations Society of America. But that being said, there's 700 other public relations associations across the U.S. So everybody who thinks there's not a lot out there, I guarantee you there are. Now, some of them are very small. Some are just like, Maryland women PR professionals. But there's some of them out there that have a really good size. They can be by industry. They can be by, region, like Mid-Atlantic. So just pick one that has like 700-800 members or more and make that introduction to them. And I find it works about 70-80% of the time. So, at most you might have to reach out to 2 or 3 of these trade associations. But generally, if you couch it as like, I'll mention you in a release I'm issuing over the wire, they will see it as a win-win. I've had a couple push back with clients and ask if they could co-brand the survey so they get a little bit more recognition. And, if they're a good trade association, I don't see a downside to that. And then you're going to take the results of the survey. You're really looking for 100 or more responses. If you don't get that, I usually circle back with the trade association and ask if they could maybe do a social media push of the survey link just to get a few more responses. And most of the time they'll do that because they want...
What does the survey look like? Like what kind of questions are you asking?
It really varies. Like right now, coming out of the pandemic, looking at your industry, what's going on in your industry? Are people having difficulty establishing a culture because people are still working a hybrid, in the office and out of the office? You could ask a couple of questions around that. Are there, signs that, money's drying up? Have you noticed that net 30 is turning into net 90? People are slow paying you. You could ask questions around that. You could also ask questions around what their marketing spend is going to be like over the next couple of quarters. It really depends on who you're sort of focusing the survey towards, to what kind of questions you ask. But there's all generally lots of questions. What are things that you'd ask colleagues at a conference? Things that you've noticed and you wonder if other people are experiencing that as well, or if it's just specific to your company. And there's also, looking at what the news is right now. There could potentially be questions around that. There's always politics and other types of things that potentially could affect how money is spent in your industry or other types of things. So if there are things in your industry that are specific, perhaps build some questions around that. Ask coworkers what are some questions they'd want to know from other people in the industry right now.
The survey is targeted towards your target audience or towards colleagues, other people in your space?
other people in your space. So the goal of this is to stand out in your industry and to be recognized as an expert and a leader. And so if you're just a regular company in your industry, this is a great way to really be recognized and singled out within your industry. And so this gets sent out to others within your industry. I on the Survey Monkey, the last link, you get to send them to your website. So maybe send them to a website that just talks about you and saying, hey, I recognize we're both in the same industry. And, I feel like there's a lot of room for, cooperation and working together and et cetera. And you could, send them to your social media, have links there or other opportunities, maybe get them to download a white paper. It really is a great way because you've got this association introducing you to others in your industry. And you're going to analyze the results of the survey and pick, like, I'd say no more than 2 questions to focus the press release on. And it's the questions that are the most surprising or the most important. What were the biggest aha moments from the survey? And if they don't stand out, ask around, say, hey, look at this. What do you think are the interesting aha moments here, or something we could craft a message around? And you're going to build out a press release about that 1 or 2 questions. And you're going to put some quotes by you because you're the expert. It's going to say, I believe that the numbers skewed this way, surprisingly, because of this. And again, you're putting your analysis in there as yourself as the expert. Generally, when I coach clients through this, they get between 6 to 14 earned media articles, which is a huge success. The least we've ever gotten is 4, and it was a very small industry, so not really that surprising there. But the thing that you'll notice is is this recognition from all these places. If you build out a page on your website where you put all of the responses to the survey, and I do recommend that, sometimes journalists will go there and hunt around for maybe a different possible story as well. Like maybe you focused on these 2 questions. Maybe they found question 8 is really intriguing to them because they've done research in the past and they feel like they can build a story around that. And in those cases where you have a really good resource page on your website, I have had trade publications in particular link to that page. And so it's great to get those links from these trade publications because it can really benefit your SEO because these are generally follow links and they're contextual links, and they really can be very meaningful.
Awesome. Can you talk about the difference between a follow link and a no follow link?
Sure. It's basically just a message that you put there for the computers that spider your website to say, feel free to follow this link and give them the appropriate credit. In the case of a no follow link, it's saying, don't give them credit for this link, and you don't necessarily have to follow it. But I think generally they do follow those. They just don't give credit for those links.
Does it make a difference in terms of how it indexes on Google searches?
Not really. What I find is that in a lot of cases, earned media does appear most of the time in Google News, but not always. There are people who opt out of Google News, so Google will just put them in Google Web. And so one of the things I recommend for people who are trying to determine if they've gotten media pickup is, pick a few keywords that were in the press release. If it was about a product, do a search in Google News for that product name. If it's in Google Web, you could do the same. But a really cool thing you can do in both is you can go to advanced, I think it's advanced search, and you can set date parameters. So no need searching before you sent the release. So start at the day that you sent the release to today and do a search on keywords that you would expect an article to be about. And you can sort of find in Google Web and Google News your media pickup. It probably picks up about 90% of stuff that's out there. There's always stuff that's paywalled and just inaccessible to Google. But for my clients, using a paid service to track pickup it really doesn't make sense, because most of those good ones start at like $1,500 a month. And if you think you're getting picked up in a monthly publication, it could be 2 or 3 months before it comes out. So you could easily spend, $6,000 trying to track a $400 press release and whether you got earned media. So I think that just being creative with Google web searches and Google news searches will get most of that. Also, asking new customers how they found out about you is a great way to sort of find out about some pickup, as well as looking at your logs, and asking people when they sign up for things, how did you hear about us?
Right. Yeah, it's good to know. Even if an individual is referring you, it's also good to know. You send them a little gift. So you talk about how someone can get regular local media coverage without spending a dime. Can you expound on that or explain that?
Sure. So we have a lot of people that contact us and say, I'm really only looking for local media. And I always tell them, then don't use us and save your money, because local media is probably the easiest media for you to get. And if you just think about it logically, it starts to make a lot of sense. In your local market, who could potentially write about you? If you have a local paper, it's, that yes, they would be good. So there's probably one person who covers your industry. Pay attention who writes articles about your industry. You may have to follow it for a few months for them to cover your industry. And you can also call and ask, but I like to have a name because it shows you're a little more prepared. And if you can't find their email address online, some places will just publish it. Just call and ask. These are not celebrities. These are members of the community. They're writing in the community. They're supposed to be accessible. And so asking for an email address and telling them that you're wanting to send them a pitch is not unreasonable. And they should be willing to give you that, unless they have another preferred method of you contacting them. And then if you're lucky enough to have a business magazine or business newspaper, find out who sort of covers your industry there and get their contact. What are the other opportunities in your space? Is there, we have a Baltimore magazine that may or may not cover your industry. If it's more B2C, they might be more likely. So just, do your due diligence and figure out who naturally around you would potentially cover you. And once you have that Rolodex, which I guarantee you probably is going to be less than 8 people, just reach out to them and just introduce yourself. You don't have to write a press release. You just have to write a few sentences that are you pitching something, an idea for a story. And you could say, hey, my name is Mickie Kennedy. I run a press release distribution service in the Baltimore area. And I have seen a trend where a lot of people are using paid media placement, and I would love to discuss why I believe that's a mistake and a waste of money, and why you should be building out a more organic campaign focused on earned media. And then maybe I have a really great quote. I'll just put that quote there. And I think that quotes can be really valuable, because if you have an amazing quote, a journalist can kind of envision an entire article written around it. And so I think that quotes are one of these secret little Trojan horses that you can put in there that really excites a journalist. And what makes a great quote? It could be, me being a poetry background, could be the way I wrote. Is it eloquent or beautiful? But it can also just be, are you saying something very concise or powerful? That if they were to paraphrase, there would be a loss, like a loss of magic, So I think that just spending a little bit of time and making a meaningful quote to add to that those few sentences can really make a difference. That being said, you may send a few of these pitches and nothing happens, and that's not unusual. What a lot of my clients that I've coached through this have found is that maybe they do 2 or 3 pitches, and all of a sudden the journalist starts to pay attention to them. Sometimes they get contacted by the journalist about an article that they're writing that has nothing to do with a pitch that you've done, but you're on their mind because they see you reaching out to them maybe every other month or quarterly. and with a pitch, and all of a sudden they're saying, hey, I'm doing this story and we're writing about, going green. And I remember you saying in a recent pitch about your dry cleaners using, environmentally friendly solvents. Could you talk a little bit more with me about that for a potential article? And so I always tell people, give it time. I generally find that if you do this on a regular basis, whether it's every other month or quarterly, eventually you will get in the front of their mind, and you will find it a lot easier to get pickup, as well as them reaching out to you. I think it's the same reason that in my area, the Baltimore Sun, anytime a journalist is looking to plug in a company, it's generally the same 2 or 3 companies to get plugged in. If they're talking about, HR trends, and they'll plug in a local company that I've seen again and again in the Baltimore Sun. And I think it's not because they paid for that. I think it's because they've established a relationship with that journalist, and the journalist knows he can just pick up the phone and contact them, and they'll give them a great quote that they can just plug into a story that they're working on.
And let's back up a second. Where would you first go to find these people, these journalists?
So the first place I'd go is to the website for that. In the case of the newspaper, just go to the newspaper. Yeah, and I would look at who generally covers my industry, do searches, and if it's a couple of people, I would reach out and get their email addresses. If it's one person, I would call and get their email address. Some publications just publish their email address because they want their media to be very approachable in the community, and that's a really good standard to have. It is true that some of them prefer being on social media. Twitter used to be really big, or X used to be really big for a lot of journalists, but I know that a lot have left due to management changes over there. So just get a feel for where they're playing. But I think in most cases, email is probably the most appropriate. I have had people when they call to ask for their email address that they just patch them through to the person, and I've had clients who just hang up because they get overwhelmed, like, oh my God, this journalist is going to answer the phone and I don't know what to say. Don't overthink it. Just say, hey, my name's so and so. I'm in the community. I've noticed that you've covered my industry, and I am working on a pitch, and I just wanted to get that in front of you. Can I get your email address? And generally they'll say, hey, just give me the pitch now over the phone, or they'll give you the email address. And if they push you, just say, well, I haven't completely thought it out, and I'm still working on a quote. I prefer to email. Could I just get that email? They'll give it to you. It really
it's interesting approach.
Yeah, and
be like very direct. Hey, I wanna sell you something. I mean, it's
Right.
free, but I want to sell you on something.
Well, journalists want to be pitched because it makes their job easier. They are in this terrible situation of having to constantly come up with content. And if they're covering particular industries, they're often coming up with a content deficit, and they're having to put their thinking caps on and trying to figure out different ways to cover this industry and talk about things that are meaningful. Their job is largely being gatekeepers and trying to determine what their audience is going to be either educated by or entertained by. And if you're coming to them with potential things that could solve that, then they should be welcoming you and be really open to covering you.
So is that the jargon to pitch an article?
It is. I mean, it's the same thing that PR firms do when they pitch directly to journalists at trade publications and major newspapers. They tend to do a bit more of it over the phone, but they also do email as well. There are journalists who just don't like to pick up the phone for whatever reason. Maybe they're just shy English majors in general, and they're just like, I'm not picking up the phone, let it go to voicemail. But I do think that this is something that works. It's really just building a relationship. And if you're willing to build a relationship with people locally, that works. You can also do it on a national level, but it can be overwhelming. And sometimes you have a message that is really has the ability to leverage outside of just one or a few contacts. The case study that's at the top of my website talks about a press release that we did during the pandemic for a very short-lived initiative to help restaurants that were closed during the pandemic. And if you pitch that directly, it would take forever to get pickup. But we just hit send with a press release, and over 100 places picked it up. All the major publications and many small daily newspapers across the country picked it up. And so that's the ability of leverage when you have something that's very meaningful that you have to get out in a very timely way.
What would you say a person should be investing in before they invest in something like this? Or would you say this is the first thing a person should invest in their marketing?
I think it's one of the really important things. We work with a lot of startups. About a third of the people that appear on Shark Tank use eReleases for getting their release out. They're encouraged by the producers to do a press release the week that their episode airs. And so we do work with a lot of startups, and I think a lot of startups are attracted to media because they know it's going to make everything that follows easier. When you've got a few articles written about you, it's a lot easier to do paid advertising and convert, because people will, maybe see those logos on your website or have encountered you, and now they're seeing a marketing message, and they know that it makes conversions a lot easier. It also helps from a standpoint of attracting additional funding, because investors like to invest in people that have been recognized by editors and journalists as being newsworthy and worthy of media.
And what's the typical investment like for a small company, like if they were to go ahead and do a press release?
Sure. So, a press release with us, we have a new customer special that you can see in the footer of our website. That's like, I think, $350 to distribute a release. It doesn't include writing, and I do challenge people to try to write it yourself. They're very simple products. They're written in the third person. They're supposed to be very accessible, like a sixth grade level of writing. It's not advanced writing, except for the quote. I put a little more emphasis and magic in the quote that you're writing. But feel free to send us the release to review. Allow a business day or two for us to get back to you, and that's whether you use us or not. I only employ editors at eReleases. We have 6 editors there, and you can contact us by email or chat or phone. And we help people build out a PR campaign, but we're a la carte, so you can get started for as little as $350. I do tell people that if you're going to try PR, do try to commit to a proper campaign rather than a single release. And a campaign is usually 6 to 8 releases, and each one is different. So not different releases about the same launch or the same announcement, but try different hooks. And I do recommend that a great place for people to start is I have a free video masterclass on building a strategic campaign of releases, and it's at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN, completely free, less than an hour, because I recognize, I've paid for and let these 12 and 15 hour courses just languish. If you have to make it digestible. And so you can go through an audit, and it'll talk about building a survey or study. It'll talk about these other types of releases that my clients pick up on, because I do 10,000 to 12,000 releases a year. I see the releases that tend to get pick up, and I've noticed a lot of patterns on the releases that generally work again and again.
And this is something you offer for free?
Correct. Completely free. I'm trying to get my customers to do more meaningful releases, because I know they'll have better results and they'll come back more again and again.
Awesome. So how do you go about honing in on a business's unique selling proposition?
It really is determining what your elevator pitch is, what it is that you do that's different than everybody else. And I think that that's why startups tend to do really well with PR, because they've nailed their elevator pitch. They know what defines them in the market and distinguishes them from everybody else.
I think it's more with a service business. You see that a lot, where it's not productized. and it's very much commoditized. Like it's like, oh yeah, I'm also a carpet cleaning company. I also do that. I'll do it for cheaper. I'll do it faster.
And
So and
sometimes with with sometimes with service-based businesses, there's USPs that you have that you don't even know. I had one that says, just in passing, well, we have like 150 hours of onboarding videos that are just available that easily walk people through every type of implementation. And I'm like, that's a USP. You really need to celebrate that and put it out there a little bit, because people who are shopping, your service and others, that's something that really distinguishes you from everybody else.
right, right. How do your audits go? Just walk me through the process a little bit.
So it really is sort of like taking that master class that I have and just sort of going through that, asking questions like, what are, what are gaps or blind spots in your industry? What is it the trade publications generally don't write about? Again, what you would talk to people at conferences is often about these, because where else, if you don't see people reporting it, you're just going to rely on, sitting around the water cooler and talking to others and saying, have you noticed this or this, and things like that. And that those are really often ripe for opportunities. We had that carpet company I mentioned. Their industry blind spot was none of their trade publications talked about the fact that the biggest competitors to independent carpet companies is the big box home improvement stores. And so we talked about it, and I think that's why it went viral in the carpet world. Well, I told you we got 11 articles with the first press release. That's viral in the very small market of floor trade publications. But we continue to be able to talk about that and try different angles and different messaging around that. And at the end of the day, over close to 30 clips that we were able to get for that client.
Awesome. So I imagine most small businesses are not thinking like, "Oh gosh, if only I had a press release." What would you say to them?
Um, I would I would say, press releases and PR are things that you can play with and test and try. You're not going to, necessarily, be penalized for doing a press release that fails. It is one of those things that I think being creative and brainstorming and testing different hooks, you're just at the end of the day trying to build a meaningful story that a journalist would want to share with their audience. And so many people approach press releases as, we have a product launch, so we want to do a press release to move more product. And you can accomplish that, but you have to also accomplish the fact that I have to make it engaging and tell it in a way that a journalist would want to build it into an article. So what are some story elements we can put in there? What are some other things that we can do? And I think that, everybody has press releases within them. And I think that it's just a matter of committing to it and testing and trying it. And I think that, we see a big boom during recessions. We saw it, in the I guess the dot-com crash. We grew through that. The other recessions that we've had, we grew through those. And I think that what happens is people put their paid advertising on pause and they start looking for creative ways to market themselves that they maybe have been putting off or haven't done in the past. And I think that they are open to turning to press releases at that time and exploring that and seeing what they can do with that. So I think that if you don't feel you have a press release within you, you give it a shot. Go through the master class. I think that it is something that's attainable for anybody that's willing to put themselves out there, and it is a really great way to sort of stand out within your industry, and it does make it easier to convert sales and to bring leads on board.
That's awesome. Honestly, I've never really thought much about press releases, and this is very eye-opening. This is literally what you do. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
So all my social media is on the lower right of my website, eReleases.com. It's my direct LinkedIn. That's probably the best way for people to reach me directly. But again, I would challenge people just to reach out to our staff. They're very knowledgeable and very willing to help people and walk them through the entire process.
Awesome. So eReleases.com. That's the way to go. Mickie, this has been a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on Solo to CEO. And maybe, hopefully, we'll do another one of these.
Sounds good. Nice talking with you.